Alright, so let me talk about the actual technique of how I shoot those snowflake photos. Once I've captured them on my wool sock, the next step is to actually take the photo. One of the problems, again, with magnification is sometimes after I've done that, it's very, very hard to actually find the flake. When I find the flake that I want to photograph, I will aim with my camera, obviously, but on a black background, it can sometimes be hard to find the snowflake. So on the back of my ring flash, I'm going to use the light function to illuminate the snowflake, which will show up very easily through the viewfinder once I have the light on. Once I found my snowflake, I'll hold my camera in place. In this case, I'm going to hold it with my left hand to kind of hold it steady at the distance that I need it to be. Now I'll show you some more. Here we go. So if I'm here with I'm looking at the snowflake, I'm going to hold it steady with my left hand. Now, one of the things that's really interesting when you're doing snowflake photography is how very close you actually need to be to the subject. Often it's a half a centimeter, maybe up to a centimeter, to try and capture it in full focus. Now, when I find a snowflake, there's a couple things. The angle that I shoot is actually really, really important. If I come down just on top of the snowflake, what I will get is a crystal clear view of the snowflake itself, even with the ring flash, but I won't get some of the finer details. It'll look like cut glass, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. If, however, I angle it slightly, and more importantly, if I have some ambient light coming from behind the snowflake, such as the light of the day, what will end up happening is the combination between my ring flash and the natural lighting will illuminate all the fine details on the snowflake. Now, first, let me just show you this. When I actually find the snowflake, I've told you that we're not going to use any autofocus. I am merely going to move back and forth through the plane of the snowflake. What I mean by that is your depth of field when you have this kind of setup is extraordinarily narrow. In other words, it's probably a few nanometers or tenths or thousandths of a millimeter. In other words, you're not going to really see the entire snowflake in focus. What I'm going to need to do is move back and forth through the snowflake to capture each layer of the snowflake with part of it in focus, but not the whole in focus. And the way I do this is I go back and forth with my hand through the snowflake. Now I'm exaggerating the motion. Usually what I'm doing, and you'll notice I'm supporting the camera because this actually is pretty heavy to try and hold on its own, is I'm just going to move it like very small amounts, like what I'm doing right now. But just to emphasize, I move back and forth shooting photos. Now the goal here is, of course, to shoot as many photos as possible. In fact, I probably want to shoot for any one snowflake between 30 and 40 photographs in order to capture the full amount of the snowflake. That means a lot of flash power, which means that I'm going to drain my batteries very quickly. And the second thing is, for especially lower-end cameras like mine, there's buffering issues. I can only capture so many shots at a time before it needs time to buffer. During the time that it's buffering, it's really important to make sure you hold the camera perfectly still. Now, the reason I move out of the wind is even a light breeze will result in completely unusable photos when you try to stack them at the end. Try and capture as much of the flake as you can, and then you'll start getting some cool results.